Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to the RTI Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. Glad all you guys could join us again tonight. Trying to be festive, letting everybody know that Bob's kind of got a festive side. It is limited to only a couple weeks a year, but it is there. I look forward to this time of the year. I look forward to this time of the year to be gone. I mean, it's just kind of one of those situations where I enjoy the family part of it. I don't necessarily. Sometimes the commercialization part of it gets a little bit hectic, but that's how the economy works, so it doesn't really matter. Um, so how's everything been at Wehrs Machine? We didn't get a chance. I was late getting down here, so I didn't get a chance to visit with you, Chad. So what's been going on up there in Bangor, Wisconsin?
Well, we're plugging away, keeping busy. Orders going out the door, and we're busy planning our January 2nd virtual trade show that we're going to have here live on Saturday, January 2nd, 1 to 3. So we're going to have talk about all our new products for 2021 and kind of like what we would do at PRI and give everybody the chance to interact with us and ask questions about products and do it in a virtual platform, kind of like what you and I are doing here. So we're putting a lot of time and effort into that, getting everything ready to go for that event, and really excited to see where that takes us.
I think that's just going to be exciting. I think that's an outstanding idea that you came up with there. You can reach so many people, and I don't know how other people feel, but sometimes PRI for me is just a skosh on the stressful side, where at least if I could sit here and sit in my chair and watch what you guys are talking about, it would be a whole lot more relaxing, definitely less cost effective. Now, I wouldn't have quite as much fun after hours as I would at the PRI deal, but maybe that's what we need to encourage all these guys to do. All get together somewhere with a big screen, and then they can ask you all kinds of questions about the products, and by 3 o'clock, the questions will be great. What do you think? I think that's a good idea. Don't you think so?
Yeah, New Year's weekend, there's
New
probably
Year's weekend, yeah.
and
I mean, they can finish. They should be recovered by January 2nd from what they did December 31st.
Right, you would think so. So
yeah, so they could just extend that. That's a great idea.
Should be fun.
Yes. Robbie says, Merry Christmas to you all and all your families. Thanks for the episodes and all the great products from BHE and Wehrs. Well, Robbie, we really appreciate it. We enjoy coming here and talking with you guys and sort of giving us an hour worth of time. It's a lot of fun. Robbie, make sure you tune into Chad's deal on January 2nd, and that's going to be on Wehrs Machine Facebook.
Yep, I think we're going to have it on our Facebook page, and I think we can put it YouTube live too. So
on YouTube too.
Probably both platforms will do. So yeah, we're working on that.
Awesome, that'll be great. I was wondering when this question was going to come up. Nick, what are your thoughts on Bristol? Politically, I would have to be a little bit subdued on my thoughts about that. Man, that place is so fast and so demanding that if you're going to Bristol, I would spend a lot of time on my race car making sure that there is nothing possibly that isn't new and has very low laps on it. The stress that place, and that's going to be like Batesville, Arkansas on steroids. I mean, there's unless you've actually raced at Bristol, there's no way to explain what the car goes through, but what your body's going to go through, just with the G-forces and everything. It's going to be fun to watch. I definitely would spend a lot of time on my race car. I'd probably look for some stuff that's maybe a little heavier quality components, for that particular race. Shocks are going to have to be a little bit different. So of course, spring package is going to be a little bit different. There's no probably not much of a chance of running a 400-pound right front spring there. I just kind of find that hard to believe that we'll get super. And gear, I wouldn't have a clue. I've got some feelers out there with some people that have run Bristol. I've been to Bristol numerous times, but it's always been pavement. The last time I was there was with Brett Moffitt in his ASA car, and it was the place is just very, very interesting. So I'm sorry, Lance. At this point, I don't have any information for you, but hopefully we're going to get some information. I was thinking about it today that probably in another couple 3 weeks, we probably just need to get our good buddy Schrader on the show. He's been around Bristol probably more than anybody that's and raced, and I'm sure he probably has raced it once upon a time when it was dirt. I can remember I-70 Speedway, which some of you guys might not know that place, but when that was dirt would probably be the closest thing to anything that I'm aware of. Supposedly they're taking the banking out. That's going to be a good idea for everybody's safety. Like I said, a lot of the components that are made on these cars are made for a purpose, local, regular weekly racing, and that place is just going to be pretty demanding. Even if they take the banking out, I mean, it's still just the banking down the straightaway is going to be. You're going to enter the corner at a pretty high rate of speed. What's your opinion, Chad?
Yeah, I remember when the late models went there, however long ago that was, but they were breaking wheels like crazy going into the corner. The right front wheels were exceeding their load capacity, so they were having to run one of our wide 5 wheel spacers behind the wheel to make sure that it had an entire surface area behind that wheel so that it wouldn't break. When you just put it on the hub and had just the hub fingers on it, it was breaking them wheels instantly. So that right front hybrid Pinto hub, I would be extremely worried about that thing going that fast at Bristol. I'd probably look at putting a steel Coleman or Mittler Brothers hub on the right front of that car for sure, and making sure that your wheel hub face and your wheel inner face are lined up. So some of them diameter, we get asked all the time why our wheel spacers are so big, OD. Well, it's because the wheel manufacturers want that OD to touch the right part of the wheel. So if you're not on the right part of the wheel and that load-bearing corner is over the hub face, that's when bad things happen. So, on a Saturday night at Boone Speedway, you're not going to get the G-force. But going to Bristol, you're going to really want to make sure that especially the right front corner is dialed in and everything is looked at real close, and possibly even a different hub and brake package there just to make sure that it's not going to exceed the loads.
Well, and even the right rear still is going to, that whole right side of the car is going to take some, it's going to definitely take something down. So supposedly they're taking the banking out down to 15 degrees. Well, that would make a lot of sense. I think that would be definitely in the safety, and it's just like checking how your seat's going to be mounted in this deal. I mean, some of these cars, these guys are going to really have to concentrate on the safety factor and those type of things, just because, like I said, it's going to be a pretty quick pace. It's going to be exciting to go around there. I mean, what a lifetime experience. I mean, that place is it's just so cool. But Jim says, Chad, I'm campaigning for a longer fine thread weight jack. Chad, I'm campaigning for longer fine thread weight jack bolts for your drop cup purchase.
I'm assuming you're talking about 1 1/8 fine. So we have 4-inch, 6-inch. I'm pretty sure we got an 8-inch available, or a 9. So we should be able to suffice that drop cup, I would think. But give me a call tomorrow and we can check that out for you, Jim.
Do you think that the G loads will be worse than Knoxville or Oskley? Oh, tremendously worse. A whole different concept. A whole different concept. At least, you know, it kind of depends on how they shape the racetrack. And I'm not a racetrack expert by all means, but you take Knoxville and Knoxville especially. You know, you actually drive down into the corner quite a ways, but like Oskaloosa, you actually start your turn into the corner sooner. So even though it's long and it's super fast, the car is actually already on a turning mode long before the whole car comes down. Where, you know, if they didn't do something with the banking, you know, the whole race car is going to come down and load. So, you know, it's hard for me to say because, like I said, I don't know. I shouldn't be saying anything because I don't really know anything about what they're actually doing to the racetrack. I mean, that type of thing I couldn't actually tell you. The lightened rotors we use now say not for asphalt use. I've seen them break and wouldn't use them at Bristol. Like I said, I mean, a guy's just going to have you're just going to have to use your head on a few things, because if you think it's possible to break, more than likely that will be the place that will let you know what the limits of products actually are. And Brian, we do have a date for the Harris Clash. I don't actually have a calendar here, but I think it is August 4th. It's the first Tuesday in August. And I think that date actually is August 4th. Jim says he'll call you tomorrow. On the right front drop spring cup, or bearing.
Maybe top bearing. Maybe you wanted to say top bearing.
Well, see, the guy that's helping me here, I think he's playing tricks on me from time to time to see if I'm paying attention here. Okay. On the right front drop spring cup or bearing spring cup?
I assume he means top bearing spring cup.
I would assume that's the case.
Yeah, so. My opinion, drop cup all the time, but what's your thoughts?
Well, I like the drop cup. I mean, I definitely would.
The key is to have the screw jack lined up, though. I mean, we got some cars you can't put the drop cup in because of screw jack misalignment.
Well, and those of you who've seen the video that Bobby and Garrett did the other day on that one car that had the drop cup in it, and it was totally misaligned. And that's one of the things that you need to check, is because it's kind of like when, you know, with the regular cup, you're only so far away from the nut. Well, with the other cup, you're about that far away, and it changes the angle on it. So, yeah, it's definitely something you need to make sure that all that stuff works together. It's sometimes not everything is just a bolt-in deal, depending on the chassis manufacturer. Some guys have made those changes so that it does, and some of the older cars haven't been done yet.
August 3rd.
August 3rd. Okay, August 3rd. Got it. I knew it was right in that neighborhood, so it's August 3rd. What angle, or what do you recommend for upper A-frame angle? Well, as a rule of thumb, Ken, I like to see in the neighborhood, right front's usually in the neighborhood of around 15 degrees. Kind of depends on the chassis builder, though, on what length of A-frame they put on there. You know, if you've got a little longer right front A-frame, more angle is going to help you. Real short upper A-frame, you know, maybe a little less angle is going to be good, so it doesn't gain camber quite so fast. So definitely kind of talk to your chassis manufacturer. But on the right front, I like 15. Left front usually run around 18. Chad, on your Facebook post, your 485T swivel cup, in your response, you talked about the 485D. Is that the matching cup for the right front? And if so, do you know when they will be for sale?
1 week from today. We actually had a batch went to the zinc plater today, so the first batch of the drop cups OD grab 5-inch will be back next Monday. So we're excited. The spring cups have been hot. We've had a little trouble keeping up. The OD short cups we sold out of in about 2 weeks, thanks to you, Bob. And those are coming.
Doing what I can try to help there, Chad.
Yeah, so
Trying to help you out.
Obviously what you did with them videos and showing people how important that spring alignment is and having the OD grab and everything lined up perfectly through travel. I had another guy tell me last week that he put that car together with the OD grab and put the load stick on it and couldn't believe the difference from what he had before versus what he had with that grab.
It's daylight and dark. I mean, that's what I said. When we first got that prototype, I'm like, this is big. We need these right away. Hi, Fred. How's everything going out in California? Chad and Bob, we would like to see you guys come to Michigan this summer and help out at an IMCA track up there. Well, I haven't been to Michigan for a very, very, very long time. Never say never. Our summers kind of get a little big, but that sounds like a good Bob and Chad trip, don't you think?
A road trip to Michigan sounds like fun.
I'm
sure we can find a lake.
Oh, yeah, we can find a lake. And there's got to be an antique shop somewhere.
We're pretty good at picking.
We might be able to find a big bridge. What the heck? Last time I went on a road trip with Chad, we got to see where American-made knives were made. Got to see the largest in-house antique type place I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, you could walk around that place for 3 hours and still not completely cover it. And then we got to go and walk out on a bridge that was hit by a tornado, and that was pretty exciting. We even got footage of Chad. I picked up on the fact that Chad wasn't all that hep on heights, and I'm not really either, but luckily everything looked pretty secure, so I was what was that, 320-foot drop?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh my God. I'm like, holy cow. You could see, in fact, we actually saw a guy and his dog walking down there, and it looked like half of an ant.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Any guess on the gears for a sport mod with an open motor at Bristol? Mike, man, I have no idea. We're going to have to do some research on that. We're going to have to find out what they're doing with the racetrack itself. And I already got my buddy Brett Moffitt working on it. Told him I need some help, and he needs to get me in touch with some of his brilliant crew chiefs. And so hopefully we'll have some more information here in the next couple months. Like I said, we'll maybe try to get Mr. Schrader on here next couple weeks or next 3 weeks, sometime like that, depending on what his schedule is. Bradford, currently in England, getting my master's degree in motorsports engineering. Planning on performing my dissertation on creating a comprehensive setup guide for dirt track drivers. Any suggestions on people I can talk to or get in touch with to improve or disprove my experimental claims? Man, I'll tell you what, there's just a lot of people. Our industry has got some of the brightest minds that unbelievable. I'm quite sure there's all kinds of people that would be more than happy to be involved. Keep in mind, we all are somewhat an opinion, so to speak. Here's a couple names for you, Bradford. If you can see, Ryan, I'm sorry, I don't want to try to pronounce your last name and make it not sound right, but Austin Kirkpatrick. There's all kinds of guys out there. You won't have any problem getting information and picking and choosing what you can. I'm quite sure Chad and I would be more than happy to help any way we could too. When measuring rear trail steer, is there a specific spot on the chassis you measure to, or do you go off the front tires? Well, that's a great question, James. The problem, depending on how the chassis was manufactured, if your manufacturer does what we call leads the stub. So in other words, the race car itself from the firewall back is perfectly, usually everybody's perfectly parallel and square to the world. Once you get in front of that, depending on how they put the stub on, if they put the stub on with like a little bit of lead, you can't really go off of the ball joints because you don't really know for sure where that's at. Normally, any chassis manufacturer has a spot on their car that actually will talk about a square spot for you to actually measure that off of. I can tell you on the GRT car, because that's the one that I'm most familiar with, where the two round tubes that the trailing arms, the bottom round tubes that the trailing arms mount to, are a jig fixture. And so that's what we measure off of when we want to make sure that the rear end is square to the frame, and then whatever lead is built into the front end, it is what it is. Is there an OD grab cup like the one that you currently have? Mike, that is true. That's what Chad said he's going to have for us. Well, he says he's getting them on Monday, so we'll have them on Wednesday.
Kind of disappointed. As big of a subject as it's been, I could have had one sitting here, but kind of dropped the ball there. So
anyway, Mike, the one you're going to need, Chad will have available for us on Monday. We can either have a drop shipped to you, or we can get it for you, and you'd have it by Thursday. Bristol should be around a 471 sport mod gear, maybe a little higher for an open motor. Well, hi, Emily. You like this wreath? And thanks for the card. I was actually going to call you last night, and it was probably about 10 after 10, and I thought, well, since she actually works on Monday, she might be already in bed, so I better not call and get her out of bed. Our old buddy Emily, she's actually the one that made that wreath for us and brought it to me a couple Christmases ago, so I appreciate that. Thanks for chiming in here, Emily. I'll give you a call here in the next couple of days. Doug, it will be good to see many at Bristol. I agree. It's going to be a fun event. I'm looking forward to it.
Can't you going?
Wait. No.
What?
Well, do you know what it's going to be like to try to find a hotel down there by now?
Camp? You got a camper?
Oh, I do. I could get the motorhome out. Yeah, that. You know, I might just do that. I'd really like to go. I'd like to see it in person. I really would.
That Roadshow live from Bristol.
Hey, there we go. Oh, that would really be fun. Yeah. And Garrett says as long as he gets to go, he's all for it.
I'm sure my new video guy would come with.
Sure. Always from lower ball joints, that is the first point on the track force goes through in relationship to the rear end. Yeah, Dalton, I agree with you. It's just all depends on how the stub is actually located on the front end. All right, yeah, Mike says he's going to take 2 of them, so I already got 2 of those drop cups sold. Well, actually, Bobby said I think he said something about they've got 8 sold. So I suppose we'll have to order a big order. I have a 2015 GRT A mod setting up as a Lesotho B mod. What side-to-side angle should my rear swedge tubes be at a static or dynamic in reaction to the frame rails? Well, John, how I've always done our 2-link stuff. looking at, say as an example, if you look at the back of the car from behind her end going forward, I always turn the left one in 2 inches towards the center of the frame, and then the right one I only turn 1 inch, so that the left rear, when it steers more, it actually tries to pick up more towards the center of the car, and then the right one, as it steers, it will start to go straight on you, so you're going to end up gaining angle on the left rear, and then when you lose a little angle on the right rear, you're still in good shape with that trailing arm is running pretty much straight. The right trailing arm, it's going to come back maybe an inch, probably not a whole lot more than that, and that'll be about enough to actually straighten it out.
You missed Ryan's pronunciation of Bill Dilly, his last name.
Oh, awesome.
Bill Dilly.
Bill Dilly. Well, I was thinking that was kind of what it looked like, and I thought, well, how does the rear spring table affect a 4-bar car? Oh, Chad and his new engineer, we got this deal now, man. The spring table thing, we got it. Oh, look at that. Check out that drawing. Wow. I just talked to that young man's dad. Well, you actually told him to call me. I think it was last Friday maybe, or Thursday, I don't know. Anyways, you can see with a 4-link car, 2-link car, doesn't really matter. It's all the same concept. When you run with that right spring, as you see, that right spring is actually a little bit lower than what the left spring is. So as it goes through its rocking motion, basically you're sitting here. Don't look at the screen, Bob. Just look at my hands. If you start up here, as it goes to roll over, it's easier to climb over and load that spring. If you started lower or equal to, it's a little bit of a hesitation to get over on there. So it's extremely important to understand that how we want those things to be mounted, and that's the same thing. Like if you can run the different lengths of springs or whatever the case is, getting that right spring down an inch. We tested with this down in Texas at a chassis school. John Logue actually tested this for me. This has been quite a few years ago. But I mean, it was just dropping it. We had a whole coilover set up, and we had a bracket where we could drop that right rear down, and it was amazing the difference that made in how the car got on the right rear. So definitely, that's kind of how it affects it. It's just all getting the car so that it has a smoother transition to load the right rear. When it comes up and it hesitates and then it dumps, it's just not a smooth transition. For the Wehrs OD cups, will you be making the 5.5 spring cups in the future? And I'm positive that is the case, isn't it?
Correct. They're 5.5 short and talls, I believe, are at the plater.
Oh,
They're real close to being done, or they're at the plater. They're real close, and then the 5.5 drop will be probably still a month yet. So, but yeah, all the 5.5 cups will also be available in OD grab. The bearing is the problem for the 5.5s. Nobody in the world makes the 5.5 Torrington bearing, so we're actually getting that quoted right now. So that's probably going to be the hitch in the giddy up there, is waiting for that Torrington bearing.
okay. Kyle, we are very quick to change rear roll center with the Panhard bar. What would a good adjustment in the front roll center be, going from a fast stop and go racetrack in the heat race to cleaned off dry slick track? Basically, in the front, I mean, unless you want to go through and start changing some ball joints and stuff, and that's something that you need to do some testing with to see if that actually is going to be a big help. I've messed basically with shock absorbers, messed with the right front tire location. One of the things that you can do, like say from a heat race to a feature, you could put an additional 1/2 inch spacer on that right front. And what it does, it moves that right front out further, which in turn, once it's out there further, when the car goes to load, it'll load it, but it's basically changing your spring wheel rate. Say if you're running a 500-pound spring, the car is going to feel like when it goes into the corner, it's going to feel like you put a 450 in it. The only difference is now we're a 1/2 inch wider, so we're a little bit more stable. And by being more stable, the front end will actually turn better without trying to shear traction off. And it just allows the car to roll the center a little bit better. That's one of the things that we've done. I've done that for years. We normally start with an additional 1/2 inch spacer in the right front. And then a lot of times if the racetrack's a little bit heavy, we'll take that 1/2 inch spacer out. And then when feature time comes, we'll put it back in. What's your opinion on that, Chad?
Yeah, the front roll center, I mean, it's so much harder to change than the rear roll center. Obviously, the Panhard bar is very easy to adjust, but the front roll center is a lot trickier. As you said, it's something that needs to be tested, and it's not as easy as just throwing in a ball joint because you change so many variables there. But hopefully you got the right chassis and you got the front roll center dialed in. And really, once you get the front roll center and the rear roll center dialed, you don't touch the Panhard bar a lot. Once you get a consistent baseline setup, you're working with shocks and springs and 4-link rods more than you are the Panhard bar and the front roll center.
Well, and I'm still kind of an old school guy too, to the point where, once again, you got to remember, whatever your lap time speed, say your lap time speed was 17 seconds for your heat race. And then you watched your classes, your support classes, and you've been timing those guys, and all of a sudden the racetrack is slowed up a 1/2 second to 3/4 second. So that's telling you that I'm not going to get in near as fast, so it's not going to have the centrifugal force to roll, or the G-forces to roll on that right front. Many times I put a 10-pound chunk right up there by the shock, just so that, and it depends on where I'm starting too, because if you're starting, say, third row or on the inside or whatever, you got to make sure when that flag comes down, when you get down to the corner, that you can turn, and that's going to hurt you a little bit traction wise, because it's going to restrict a little movement there long term. But sometimes if I can pick up a little bit on corner entry and through the middle, I can sacrifice a little bit off. Chad, does the IMCA 3-link shock plate interchange with the adjustable shock plates on the housing clamp, or do have to buy different brackets?
So all of our plates on our 4-link and 2-link cages interchange from the clamped up cars to the bearing suspension cages, with the exception of the bronze cage. So the bronze suspension cage is a different bolt pattern. The plates are all really small. The housing's really small. When we initially designed that suspension cage, we did it for Jimmy Owens. He's a weight freak, so he wanted everything on that unsprung weight to be as light as humanly possible, as light as we possibly could build. So we shrunk all that stuff down to make that thing extremely light. So them plates do not interchange.
But all the rest of them, the bolt patterns, is exactly the same.
Yes, everything interchanges, yes.
Okay, Alan got on here late. Well, Alan, where you been? Anyway, he got on here late and he wants to know where the drop cup, what does the drop cup do? Well, what the drop cup does is it lowers the spring table in the front of the car. It does the same thing as what we showed you on the rear, with the right front being down a little bit more, so that when the car goes into the corner, the actual pickup point, even though your spring is the same, but the drop cup is down 3 inches?
2.5.
2.5 inches down inside the spring. And so it actually thinks that it's much lower because it goes with where it's actually mounted. So it helps the car get over on the right front more. And that's kind of the key to pretty much everything today in all dirt setups, whether you're running a hobby stock or whether you're running a sport mod or whatever you're running. The key is getting that thing loaded on the right front, so that the car goes in, pivots on the right front, and rolls around the right front to get you off the corner, get you through the corner, and get you off the corner. So that's actually what it does. It just makes the car, allows it to get on the right front better. When running the left front chain limiter, would you loosen that chain when the track is heavy and tighten it when it slicks off? All depends on who you talk to. I've heard people do both ways. My experience, it depends on what you want to accomplish. If you want to have, when the racetrack gets slicked off, if you're more concerned about side bite, then you would want to loosen the chain. You would want to tighten it up when the racetrack is heavy, and you'd want to loosen it when the racetrack starts to slick off. If you want forward traction, then you would want to, you've already got plenty of traction already when the racetrack's heavy. So then you want to tighten that down so that the car doesn't roll on the right rear as much, or loosen it up so that it rolls on the right rear, I'm saying, and you can traction off the right rear, gets the car freer coming off the corner. When you tighten the chain up, the car is actually going to be a little tighter on the left rear when you come off the corner. So for our setup, I use the theory of shortening the chain to get me more traction off the corner and make sure my driver is aware of the fact that we might have to put a little bit more panhard bar angle in it, or do something to that effect, or he just knows that he needs to drive the car in straighter. It's not gonna, he's gonna be short on side bite if you do that. How does the shorter pull bar, 24 to 28, with more angle located in front of the center on the rear end differ from a longer pull bar, 32 to 40, with less angle located behind the center of the rear end? What's a different effect happening on the car? What's your opinion on that one, Chad?
Well, the shorter pull bar with more angle is going to be more instant traction and not as much longevity traction. The longer one is going to be, with less angle, is going to be longer traction, so farther down the straightaway. So my theory is the shorter the track, the shorter the pull bar, the more angle for more instant traction. Pretty much a standard 30-inch, 16 degrees, pretty standard. The short ones give you a ton of instant traction. If you're really smooth foot feet guy, you probably have an advantage with that short one, but it's not going to be very, very controllable in a situation where you're hammered down and moving around and doing that kind of stuff. But so in front of the center line, we always had it in front of the center line because of axle wrap. And nowadays we ain't getting a lot of pull bar travel. So when it's not wrapping that much and you're only getting an inch of travel, then you can move it farther back. So the farther that center point is behind rear end, the more traction. But you don't want to go over center. So it's kind of a balancing act. Like sport mods, it's easier to go behind center line on the sport mod because it's a solid link. So the A mod cars with a pull bar that moves generally have to stay centered or 1 to 4 in front, somewhere in that range is kind of the wheelhouse for that. But if you got a pull bar that doesn't travel a lot, you can put a long guy on there and get a ton of traction out of it.
And the other thing is corner entry, because as the pull bar tractions up and the rear end gets steered and everything, the longer pull bar on corner entry is going to have less effect on loading the right front. Shorter pull bar is going to have more effect on loading that right front, just because it's going to unhook or unload the car, let the rear end be a little bit freer, load the front end a little bit more. Caster for the front. I have seen everything from 1 to 4 degrees of caster split with low or high overall caster. What are your thoughts on higher overall caster, say 8 on the right front, 6 on the left front? And that's another thing these guys are going to have to be paying attention to about Bristol. That's a whole other conversation. That's a lot of caster. You definitely would want to make sure you bump steer the car with that amount. What it's going to do is it's going to give you a ton of feel in the front end with that much caster. If you were running the 3-piece spindles, the 7-degree spindle, yeah, I don't think that's out of, I mean, it's just more than I would run. You know, our stuff is 6 and 3 for the 3-piece spindles, and 4 and 3 or 4 and 2 for the standard Pinto spindle. But it's going to give you, like if you've got a rookie driver or whatever, it's definitely going to give the car a lot more feel. I'm just afraid that you're going to get in a situation where we kind of talk, it's kind of about the jacking load. With that much caster, when you get into the corner and you start to counter steer the car, it's going to try to raise that corner up faster, which in turn is going to try to load the left rear, and sometimes it can unload the right. So it's just kind of depends on, you know, kind of depends on the whole program. But definitely, if you choose to do that, make sure you bump steer the car with that. On a 4-bar modified, can you explain what moving the pull bar up and down and forward and back on the rear end mount does? Well, up and down, you're changing your reaction time. If you lower it down, it's going to react quicker. You're going to actually end up with more movement. So a lot of times when we've moved them down, we've had to go stiffer on the pull bar. Moving it forward and backward is kind of the same thing. If you're ahead of the rear end, say 3 inches ahead of the rear end, and you get 2 inches of movement, which you're in today's world, anything over 1.25 inches is rare. But say you do that, when you're pulling in and the car's gaining angle and you're getting a lot of hike and everything, so now all of a sudden this pull bar is gaining a lot of angle. Well, if it's ahead of center, it's always gaining angle. It's working into the angle. Where if you're behind center, then it's always working out of angle. Now, in my opinion, on super big racetracks or a long racetrack, we had good success where we could have a lot of angle in the pull bar, and it would start with a lot of angle, but as you got down the straightaway, the angle decreased and it kept traction in the car longer. So it's something that's worth playing with, you know, depending on your car and everything. But that location's it just depends on your driver. You know, if your driver likes a little bit quicker reaction stuff, you know, I'd probably be in front. If the driver likes a little slower reaction stuff, I'd probably be in the back. Like Chad said, with it being in the back, it definitely has more traction later. It's not as instant a traction as it being in the front. Going from a swing arm car to springs in front of the housing, pros and cons, 3-link of course. Well, the swing arm car, most of those cars are always like a 60-40 ratio. So of course, if you've got, you know, your car technically needs 200 pounds of right rear spring to make the car function. Well, with the swing arm car, you'd have to be in a 320-pound spring or somewhere in that neighborhood to do the same thing. You will find that the car, when you put the springs on the housing, the car is just going to react quicker. You're going to be able to have less spring in it. And in my opinion, it's just going to react a little bit quicker. If you're on a heavy, rough racetrack, it's definitely going to be a little bit more sensitive than what the springs on the swing arms. But Casey, you'll definitely, it will improve your race car. Definitely do that. Chad, do you have a bracket like the WM303F that will work on a three-piece metric spindle?
We do not. The three-piece spindle is a little tougher than the Pinto to make that bracket for. I don't know what you race, Ryan. If you race IMCA, it's not legal anyway to put it on the front. I don't know why you want to put it on the front, but the only reason we made that bracket was for Nick Hoffman, and it was for shock clearance. Where the caliper is located in the 360-degree circle has no effect on braking. A lot of people misconception, they think you put the rotor or the caliper on the front of the rotor and that thing's going to pull her down on the right front and it's going to be rotating like crazy, but that is false. So we do not have one for the three-piece. The way that spindle is built, it's really challenging to get it to go on there. So.
Charlie has a question. What spindle do you feel drives the best? Well, I'll have to admit, when you're talking about drive, as far as feel and the steering wheel and everything, I still believe that 10-degree Pinto spindle is going to give you more feel in the front end. However, the three-piece spindle, which is only a 7-degree spindle, it might not have quite the feel, but it also doesn't scrub as much either. So in speed-wise, I kind of confirmed this late last fall that the three-piece spindle, the car maybe you got to get a little bit more used to how it drives because it doesn't quite stick the front end like it would, but it definitely has more speed through the corner. It's got more momentum speed because it's not trying to load and unload the suspension. It's not trying to load and unload the front wheels. So in my opinion, if I was putting spindles on a car today, now if you'd have talked to me 6 months ago, I'd have swore on the Pintos. But in my opinion, the three-piece is by far a better setup. You might need to do some different chassis work to get it to where it has the feel that you do. We found that the three-piece spindle definitely likes a little softer front end. In a stock car division with a 9-inch rear with stock pickup points, is there any benefit to running a Panhard bar if it has to be at least 30 inches long and at ride height be within 1 inch of the center line of the axle tube? Track is typically slick and medium bank. Thanks.
Four-link stock suspension doesn't need a Panhard bar, right?
No. So in the stock car division, Eric, it would hurt you if you didn't. You'd have to put a center link in it, which wouldn't be illegal in the stock car, and you'd have to. Yeah, it wouldn't give you any advantage. In fact, it would probably hurt you unless you redid the whole rear suspension. If the rear end spring location was open, 9-inch with a Panhard bar, would you still run the left rear, behind, right rear, and front sliders on both? Well, Cody, I'm not sure what type of car you have, but in my opinion, I would put the left rear in front and the right rear in back. And the reason why is because when the car steers, it's going to continue to load that left rear spring and it's going to unload that right rear spring, which in a sense is going to actually give you more traction. The downside to that setup is the car can be a little bit more finicky in the middle of the corner to the point where it can be a little tick tight at times. So you just kind of have to drive and set your setup around that. But I believe that with the left rear in front, right rear behind it is going to have more traction. On a slick racetrack, I definitely think you'd like it better. What are the pros and cons to running a softer right rear shock on a modified? Well, Alan, it kind of depends on, a soft rear shock is going to get the car on the right rear faster, but it's probably not going to stay there as long. So with that being said, it kind of depends on The speed of the racetrack, normally we try to run standard like a 4 type valve at the beginning of the night, switch to a 3 if the racetrack gets slick. Sometimes, depending on the racetrack, we'll run the 4 all night long. Just all depends. The softer shock's going to get the car in the right front a little sooner. So if the racetrack slows down, it would be more comparative to that particular thing. One thing that I forgot to mention, we are on our week number 3. So our deals for this particular week is we have a pair of new lower A-frames with new house studs, and it's a price point of $500 for the pair. Also, chassis schools, and I apologize, Tad, I meant to tell you this earlier, but the chassis schools are going to be online on IMCA TV. All 3 chassis schools, the Sport Mod, the 4-link, and the stock car school will be online. So those people who have some COVID concerns, I feel pretty confident that we've got a good handle on all the things that we're going to do for the school people that want to come, that we're going to be in good shape and we're going to be safe. We're going to limit the class to 45 people, and that is going to give us a little bit better of a deal to spread people out a little bit. We are going to require you to wear a mask when you're walking around, but when you're sitting down or during the actual school, you won't need to do that. And we will have to take temperature checks at the door just to make sure everybody is good. Chad's answer, UMP modified with a metric clip running metric spindles with a Pinto arm. Look for shock clearance.
Pinto spindle only then.
Yeah. I've tried a chain on the left front of my modified one night this past season with 1.5 inches of drop, and it was almost undrivable down the straightaway. It darted all over the place. Once I unhooked, the car was quite fast. What could cause this? Boy, Dan, I'm not really sure. 1.5 inches is pretty reasonable. That's about the drop that we usually set our chain to. It must have just been a situation where it was too quick to react. It might have, depending on what shock combinations you had, it might have. What it would probably done is it would have started over on the right, loading the right rear, and then when it got to the chain, it unhooked the right rear. I've not seen that in the past, so I apologize. That's a situation that happened, but it had to be all about it was affecting the roll in the car too much. Northern Sport Mod, but debating going to an A mod. Class is lower car count. Keeping 2-link left rear, 4-bar right rear. Questions earlier. Gotcha. Well, if you're keeping yeah, I understand now. Yeah, well, if you're going with a 4-bar rear suspension, you definitely want the shock in front of the spring and shock in front of the housing on the right rear. I still would highly recommend with the spring in front, because that would be like, with a 2-link setup, if you're running a 2-link with the left rear, that's kind of like what the setup that Jeff Taylor won the Super Nationals with. He was actually on a 4-bar left rear, but we had a bracket that Chad makes to be able to mount the spring and shock solid to the rear end. So what it was doing is it was loading it up, and kind of like what I talked with Jeff about, the fact that was going to tighten his car up quite a bit, and that he just had to maintain for the first 20 laps until the racetrack started to go away. And once it started to go away, the race car is going to come to him. And sure enough, it did. About lap 30, the car really came in, and he ended up winning the race because of that. But that would be my suggestion.
Wouldn't you run a 4-bar left rear, 2-link right rear?
That would be my suggestion too. But either way, if I was going to run a 4-bar, if I was going to run it like what he was saying, that would be what I would say. But in my opinion, yeah, I think you'd be better off running the 4-bar on the left rear so that you could load the spring and you could do a lot of the things that you might not be able to do with a 3-link. Okay, so where are we at time-wise, Garrett? Okay, we got about 4 minutes left. Wasota 3-link, 15-degree left lower, 15-inch, 17-inch right rear at 10. Springs ahead of shocks behind, 30-inch pull bar at 15, mounted 11 inches above the center and 3 inches ahead. What would you recommend for static pinion angle? 7 degrees. What about if I jack underneath the seat and the chain is tight at 30 degrees? Where should the pinion angle be? In my opinion, at that point, you still want the pinion angle to be 1 degree negative. So in other words, it's still tipping the front of the pinion down, and you're measuring off of the J-bar plate. That's where we measure off all the time. So normally we're between 7.5 degrees in a static mode, but I always recommend that in a dynamic mode where you're going underneath the seat and jacking against the chain, just want to make sure that the pinion doesn't go past center, in my opinion. Okay. Anything else, Chad, that you got? That was our last question we had.
Sure. We made a little change to our stagger stick. That's pretty cool. After we've had a few people using this baby, we made it even better. So now when you measure your first tire, then you hit the button on the first tire, and that stores that circumference. Then you go measure the second tire, and then it stores the second tire. But then the stick is live in the middle there. So then theoretically you could measure a right rear and then measure a left rear and then another left rear and then another left rear and keep changing your mind, or vice versa, to find the best set. Then you got the numbers held so you can go to the notebook. So before the first version, the second number in the stagger always moved and you had to member it or write it down right away. So now it holds that stagger number and both circumferences until you get to the notebook. So just a little tweak there that Gen 1 already got an adjustment from a buddy of mine, Asphalt Racers. So, but these are available now online. The new stagger sticks, pretty cool, trick little tool.
That's a nice enhancement. I would have never thought about that, but I would imagine after using it, that would be pretty handy.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Because the objective of all these trick tools is so we don't have to do a whole bunch of writing.
Correct.
Because then you don't know what the notebook is. Will more pinion angle kill power? Well, it's not going to increase it by all means. You just don't want to get too out of line. The biggest thing is when the car's all loaded up, you kind of want the drive shaft to be running at the least amount of angle that it can, so that when it comes out of the transmission, you have the least angle as possible. What is your opinion on the IMCA stock car front shock rule? Well, Brandon, in my opinion, I think it's going to have. I think it's going to have some good things. There were some people that were doing some funky stuff with that shock and doing some load things, which I'm not saying wasn't a good deal. The problem with that is sometimes we outdo ourselves to a point where we have to look at the big picture and say you've got 25 guys racing, but only 3 of them get it. Well, then all of a sudden you've got a race, a 3-way race. Instead of, if 10 people understand what's going on, then you've got a chance, of more it takes some of the invention and innovation out of it. So I think it's going to make the setups a little bit less sensitive. So that's just my opinion. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time actually thinking about that whole deal. But yeah, I tell you what, guys, I thank you for all your Merry Christmases, and our next show will be January 4th, and hopefully we're going to spend half the show talking about how great Chad's show was on January 2nd. And I think that's going to be an exciting deal. I think that's just a very innovative way to get to a whole bunch of customers in a relaxed format, and then they'll be able to ask questions, kind of like what they do here, right, Chad?
Correct. Yeah. So we're going to talk about. We're going to probably lay out our bullet point of the products that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to go through and talk to the drivers and the crew chiefs and the guys using the products, and then just kind of highlight all the features, and then open it up to Q&A at certain times through the event. So it's going to be pretty exciting. We're pumped for it, and we're getting pretty good at this virtual thing. So we're just going to keep making it better. So
you bet. Well, that sounds good. Well, thank you guys. All of you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And once again, don't forget about my suggestion that you can kind of get together at a big screen TV and have a party and watch Chad's show on the 2nd. You should be fully recovered and not too big of a headache. And that's from 1 to 3?
1 to 3, January 2nd, Saturday afternoon. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody, and thanks again. You guys have made 2020 fun. There for a while at the beginning of 2020, I thought it was going to be Gloomsville and Dullsville, and thanks to all you guys, I'll tell you what, man, it's pretty cool. And yeah, it wasn't my bright idea to wear this Santa hat, but we kind of had to let you guys know Bob really is a real person. You just don't get a chance to see it. Now, 4 or 5 rum and cokes down the road, Chad can tell you that I'm a little more relaxed and talk with a bigger, fatter tongue, stuff like that. But anyway, all right, you guys have a Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Chad.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Thank you, everybody.